Here we are again. So, economy and tires. Well, tires are definitely well known and famous product, and also specific attention is paid to the environment as well. So, an important impact and important from the environmental standpoint. This is the reason why some rules are in force in order to manage the universe of business models that have to be suitable and specifically conceived. So we are ready for a new section of our meeting, and we're going to have some different companies. But before coming to the core and the stories of these different companies, I'd like to ask for the support of someone who's making numbers sexy. Marc Aguettaz, GiPA. Good morning. I'd like to ask you to please switch your microphone on. As you know, GiPA is an international team of analysts and experts in the automotive sector, which monitors the market, and they support companies in their strategic decisions and marketing decisions. So I'd to ask Marc whether he can provide us with some information relating to the landscape we're in, relating to manufacturers and tire manufacturers, in order to also identify the main topics that have to be dealt with, that is to say, sustainability and then circular economy. Marc. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I try to answer at best. So the first element, by preparing my contribution today, I thought about Molière et Bonjour Antillum, where Mr. Jourdain said it's important to do things without knowing you're doing things. And in fact, production of tires represented a circular economy without knowing it, because tires and retreaded tires come well before the concept of sustainable development and circular economy. So this is something we need to bear in mind. And it is a well-experienced product. And I also have some data with me that I'd like to share with you. A couple of slides, 2 slides only, that will make many participants smile. So out of total consumption of tires, the retreaded market is a small portion, accounting for 15% of tires used by, for instance, commercial vehicles, and also 30% of companies that use retreaded tires, well, they for instance, amount to 25% of total consumption, meaning that 30% of companies are very much strict, and the market of retreaded tires cannot exceed half of the market, because before, being remanufactured, well, these tires have to be manufactured, and then they subsequently have a second life. But of course, this portion of retreaded tires is something is well distributed in very small companies. And although, for instance, when companies increase in size, of course, the relevance of these tires increases as well, but also because virtuous companies increase, which are able to manage all of these products. And then there's a portion of products that have to be returned, etc. Then we specifically address those companies that marginally deal with the retreaded tires. And the first objection we are made is the safety. Over 60%, for instance, of those that don't deal with retreaded tires, they say they don't do that due to safety reasons. The second portion is, for instance, linked to the management of the out-of-use products. And someone, for instance, tend to, say that others shall be liable for that. And thirdly, is for instance, the performance per kilometer, then the quality of the product, or also the cost intended as a cost per kilometer as it is perceived. So this is an element. Then we also have to consider those that are in charge of installing these tires. Well, our market is made up of corporations, so 72% of tires are installed by specialized, for instance, dealers, and also in tire repairers. But there's a growing number of, for instance, workshops inside of the fleet that account for 22%, with 1 tire in 5 is installed inside of a workshop that is directly, let's say, linked to the fleet. So these are the two main operators, and of course the surveys we carried out show how the network of manufacturers is now managed by, let's say, 7 tires in 10 are installed by tire specialists and tire repairers, and 1 in 5 is installed by the internal workshops. So they have the responsibility to manage these products. And I wish, I like to recall that, for instance, 1/4 of, for instance, small entrepreneurs, well, they often resort to tire repairers. Then when it comes to the fleet, well, 30% is installed by the internal workshops of the fleet, and this concerns a major portion of the fleet. And at the end of my contribution, I'd like to recall that circular economy works if it speaks to the wallet and not to the emotion, not to the heart of people, and not to good feelings. So if you succeed in developing a system that is a virtuous one, well, the main protagonists of world economy that, of course, provide a major portion of the assets we use in Europe, well, they are not thinking about reduction of CO2 or the future of the planet. They are only considering the increase of industrial production. And, of course, retreaded tires are remanufactured locally and not far from where they are used, whereas new tires may, of course, go all over the world before reaching our country. So this is my conclusion. So we need to develop a model that has to be a virtuous one, because this is the only one that works. But in order to work, it has to speak to our wallets, not to our feelings. A very quick question. Is there any figure that has specifically changed, some figures that surprised you among these statistics? What surprised me is the network of, let's say, manufacturers which were not part of the network. So tire repairers continued to operate and never let others step in. Okay, thank you, Marc Aguettaz, and thank you for your contribution. So now, next, I'd like to show to you some ideas, and when talking about ideas, we need to talk about companies and customers. So there will be Stefano Carloni, who is the chair of the AIRP, the Italian Association of Tire Repairers, and then Enrico Moncada, Continental Italia, Marco Prosdocimi, Goodyear Tyre, and Francesco Capurso, Marangoni, and Silvia Vergani, Michelin, Italia. Let's start with Mr. Carloni. You have the floor, and then it is necessary to understand what is the key word, in your opinion, relating to this specific and important topic of circular economy. Please. Good morning to all of you. The key word in circular economy is eco-design, and we may define as a long-lasting design of the product. Let's make a step back just to frame a little bit the situation and what retreaded tires do. And this, well, is something absolutely important in circular economy. Because, of course, we're not talking about raw materials which are disassembled. Actually, we're talking about a functional use of the product. So we produce, of course, something that returns to the previous conditions, and it has to be a functional, let's say, recovery. We may also say that tires are linked to the circular economy, as tires represent a case of circular economy ante litteram, because for over 80 years we have retreaded tires, and today we focus on industrial tires, whereas in for instance, specific car tires, we are involving private cars, but also, for instance, the tires of aircrafts are retreaded up to 6 times. So this is something that goes back to eco-design. What does it mean? It means that tire was designed in order to be retreaded up to 6 times. The advantages of such reconstruction, and well, the advantages are absolutely important from the economic standpoint, and also well, we are talking about huge advantages from the, let's say, environmental standpoint, because we are recovering 70% of raw materials, and it's therefore possible to reduce the quantity of waste that we produce. And when talking about eco-design and then a long-lasting duration of products, it's necessary to make a distinction, because not all of the tires are designed in order to be retreaded. If we consider, for instance, low-cost tires, they cannot be retreaded because, of course, the conditions will not allow to do so, and they cannot be recovered. Conversely, a relevant portion of premium tires can be easily retreaded, and they can face a new life cycle, and even more than one. What else? We have to say that for decades we've had some bad habits, and tires have been considered as a disposable object or as a commodity like many other ones. But now the time has come to introduce a technological challenge. That is to say, we have to develop tires in a new way, and for this reason they have to be reused. So it is a challenge which involves the new tires manufacturers, and so they have to manufacture less tires, but which shall be with a higher, let's say, performance. And how are tire manufacturers reacting to this changing setting? Some of them are reacting in an effective way because we see innovation in products, and the task of manufacturers is, of course, to develop from scratch products that can be suitable in order to be reused and retreaded. And also, it is necessary to envisage a more developed and evolved system. In some cases, processes are slow, and in other cases, processes don't exist, unfortunately. Thank you, Mr. Carloni. Thank you for being with us. And so you said and underlined how sustainability depends on the industrial design. So what does this mean in the specific case of this protagonist, that is to say, tires? And how can we define the life of a product? We ask so to Silvia Vergani, representing Michelin. Good morning. Well, thank you. Thank you for involving Michelin in a debate on such important topics and so dear to us. The concept of eco-design is broad, and when it comes to tires, well, this can be defined by saying that eco-design means bearing in mind when you are designing that the product has to be studied so that you can guarantee sustainability and respect for the environment. So concretely, how can all this be implemented? We from Michelin may share with you 3 examples. One is the one that concerns the multi-life model, as we do with our, for instance, truck tires. Multi-lives means that the first life is the one that the tire lives as a new tire. The second, when we retread it, and the third life is with reconstruction and remanufacturing. So in order to allow a tire to have more lives, it is necessary to design it already starting with this vision. So our engineers and chemical engineers, and while studying the structure of the tire, have to take into account that the tire has to cover a given amount of kilometers as a new tire and the same number of kilometers as a retreaded tire. So while designing, of course, all of our experts have to study the tire by, for instance, aiming to the reduction of its weight. Technology allows us to have the same performances by using less raw materials as compared to the past. In this way, it is possible to reduce the weight of the tire, and consequently, we can consume less energy during, for instance, the rolling phase, and this favors sustainability. So the first example of eco-design in the design phase. Eco-design is also something that we have in the manufacturing phase, and this is the second concrete example. For instance, we have an approach of sustainability also during the production plants by trying to reduce the environmental footprint and by trying to reduce the emissions of CO2. This entails that factories have to adjust their manufacturing processes so that less energy is used, less water is consumed, and less waste is produced. Hence, this entails a huge effort. So please allow me to add one thing, because Michelin in 2005 up to 2020 has halved the environmental footprint of its factories. I can also provide you with a third example of eco-design, which is inspired by a different analysis of this word, eco. And it leads me to reason by saying that eco-design is also something which is designed in order to be economically sustainable for the customer. I clarify myself. If you buy a new tire which can be retreaded and then you have it retreaded, you can cover more kilometers. A given number of kilometers as a new tire and the same number of kilometers as a retreaded tire. So the cost per kilometer covered will be lower than the option of non-retreading your tires. It is important for us to underline this aspect because we want to contribute not only to the sustainability of the environment but also to the economic sustainability of the companies that use tires for their own business. Thank you. Thank you, Silvia Vergani from Michelin. So many lives for a tire. So specific attention paid since the beginning. But then as to the lives of these protagonists, that is to say, tire. The life of tires, a second life, that is to say the remanufacturing or retreaded, also to mention the innovation involved, also that goes hand in hand with the progress in this sector. And of course, this has to improve the performance of products, but also the environmental impact and footprint. So, Marangoni, Francesco, Capurso, good morning. Good morning. Good to see you. So we were saying an important life, that is to say, the life of retreaded tires. Definitely, because retreaded tires have a performance which is comparable to new premium tires, and the evolution of technology guarantees retreaded tires reliability, duration, and performance, which are absolutely comparable to new tires, with the advantage of having a better cost effectiveness and also lower cost per kilometer. In detail, it is clear that the fundamental element, as it was also said by the colleagues, is the structure. So it has to be a high quality one, and therefore it has to be a premium one, and of course it is the shell that matters. But then if we move on to the process, besides considering the specific manufacturing procedure, manufacturing process entails, for instance, a specific approach, for instance, based on which the tread is put on the structure. And of course, there has to be no problem whatsoever when it comes to the mold. And then the technology and also the efficiency and efficacy of equipment allowed to have huge advantage. For instance, think about the equipment that allows to inspect the structure and see whether there are problems or, for instance, problems that or imperfections that would not be visible through the simple human eye. And also the various for instance, blends that we use are specifically developed for the application that the tire is devoted to. So we have different types of vehicles and different types of road and environmental conditions, and all this translates into different needs by end users, and consequently also different designs and different, for instance, mixtures and blends to be used. So this is constantly evolving, and it's aimed to be specific for the end use. And the use of special mixes and blends entails advantages, like, for instance, a different approach when it comes to, for instance, the rolling, and then it's a different fuel consumption or a longer duration of the tread or the tire, because of course it depends on the approach you follow, if it is an off-road or something that you use on the road. Or if you have a tire that has to be used, for instance, in a long line, it has to contain a blend that has to resist huge overheating, and then to allow a lower fuel consumption and a longer duration. Conversely, if we were to use a product for a winter use, also providing, of course, a given performance and kilometer and mileage, it has to resist and endure in situations like snow or ice. So retreaded tires are similar and the same as new ones, also according to the European Union regulations, and the labeling is actually the same as new tires. So this is important in order to provide end users with objective and unbiased elements to consider the, let's say, performances that the car has to have. So safety, reliability, duration, performance, these are the main requirements of retreaded tires. And we also add a fifth element, that is to say the aesthetic aspect. That is to say, end users also ask for retreaded tires that, besides the main requirements, also had an appearance which is the same as the original one. And in fact, also the sides are being manufactured so that, for instance, they can resist cuts and abrasions, but also from the appearance standpoint, tires have to be perfect. So nothing is left aside. Everything matters, including the appearance of tires. So thank you, Francesco. Thanks to Marangoni. And now let's move on to our next contribution, also because, as we know, tires are fundamental. And I'd like to give the floor to Marco Prosdocimi, representing Goodyear. So you have the floor, and please tell us what is the evolution also relating to, for instance, sustainable mobility. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for inviting us. So we are living transition from, let's say, internal combustion engine to electric vehicles, and up to entirely electric or hybrid cars. And tires have an important role to play because new generation vehicles, that is to say also the next ones to come, have some objective obstacles. That is to say, one is the mileage. And of course, we know that manufacturers are now relying on mileage that has to be the same as the combustion engine. And of course, the tire makes a difference. And of course, it has to allow the rolling. It doesn't have to create a friction while rolling, and that, of course, this is paramount for mileage. It might appear as something to be taken for granted, but we're talking about huge investments when it comes to the performance of the tire and also the blends used. Another important aspect is represented by the noise, because of course electric vehicles are silent, and tires are important when it comes to noise reduction. And of course, we include some specific foams that reduce the noise produced by tires. And when it comes to electric vehicles, well, they also impose a specific research and development from the production standpoint and manufacturing standpoint, because of course the weight is higher when it comes to the battery pack, and we have, for instance, an important torque that is involved, and tires have a higher stress. For this reason, of course, we within Goodyear have been investing recently in order to endure a higher weight and allow the product to be consumed within the same standards as those with the traditional, let's say, fuel. And of course, in this moment, we know that the consumption of tires is higher versus the traditional ones. And for this reason, this is an important element for research and development. And this is one of the areas in which tire manufacturers are investing a lot for the near future, also in consideration of the evolution of electric vehicles that, in the next few years will have an important market penetration. So the main challenge in this case when it comes to tire producers is linked to, of course, car manufacturers. And, of course, all manufacturers are now investing in partnerships from the technical standpoint, and to allow clear matching between the product and the tire versus other vehicles, and so that we can have a good product, and also including tires that have the same performances as traditional ones. Thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you. So, tires that accompany the transition. the transition towards electric vehicles, because the future has become our daily lives, and therefore electric vehicles represent the main actors when it comes to sustainable mobility, which appears to be increasingly sophisticated and interactive. So there's a clear will, that is to say, to provide a higher level of sustainability and at the same time a higher level of safety. So when adding up to this topic, we give the floor to Enrico Moncada, representing Continental. Thank you for inviting me. I have a question for you. I am a curious person. So, after all the things we said, how can a tire evolve to such an extent that it's involved and integrated in the digital systems that characterize, for instance, the next generations of vehicles? So I don't know whether this is easy or difficult, but I ask the expert for an answer. Generally speaking, the future of sustainability, and well, because the challenge for the future is sustainability, and of course sensors are becoming paramount. So sustainability has to embrace the environment, the economy and safety. If we think about, for instance, sensors are now used nowadays, think about the cars that we drive every day. That have the braking control, or also the autonomous driving approach. But how can we, for instance, have sensors when it comes to tires? Well, in this area, there are systems that allow the tire to be a speaking one. So the tire has to be able to speak to the rest of the vehicle by notifying and communicating data. So we are in the world of data communication, and the tire also notifies and communicates data like temperature or pressure, or, for instance, the depth of the side portion, and also the tread. I can share with you some numbers which are easy to interpret. This is real data that we see. When we see that a tire is able to communicate its pressure, so the pressure is monitored, what do we see? And what do we avoid? Basically, a tire that travels with a pressure lower than 0.6 bar, I'm talking about heavy vehicles, well, the life of a tire is reduced by 45%. So, of course, this has an impact not only from the economic standpoint, for those that have a fleet, which have to change tires, but also an environmental impact, because you have more materials produced, etc. Also, based on a number of tests performed, means a vehicle that always covers the same pathway and always covers the same routes with the same driver, well, on average, save 950 liters of fuel per 100,000 kilometers. So if we consider money, well, this is quite huge. And also, a monitored tire, well, when you have, for instance, a tire that is not suitably inflated, well, of course, there's an increase of temperature, and this entails risks. For instance, risks of accidents and also an impact on safety. And also, if you have a limitedly inflated tire, well, the rolling is lower and there's a higher level of emissions of CO2, because you need a huge effort to allow the car to move. So these examples I made are practical ones on how the sensor that communicates temperature or pressure, well, this can increase the efficiency from the sustainability standpoint, so economic, environmental, and safety. If we extend this picture to sensors, generally speaking, I just make an example, a specific example, but this can be extended to the sensors in a car, in a whole vehicle. So anything that can be, for instance, developed. Well, the key, this is the key for a sustainable future. Not too bad. A sustainable future, well, entailing hope, and this is something that we've mentioned also at the beginning of this conference with our CEO. Thank you, Enrico Moncada, for this story. And now I stand up and I would like to greet all those that made up the activities carried out this morning. So all those that contributed with their stories and shared with us what they did and how they've faced a difficult moment and looked at the future in an effective way, and also with a great deal of optimism.